All right, all right. We are live. Thanks for joining us. Will, what's going on, my friend?
Not much, Wes. How you doing?
Man, I'm doing awesome. So, we're going to be talking about some privacy stuff, which I think is awesome, right? Like, we security people we tend to care a lot about privacy. It goes part and parcel with security. How do we protect our own private lives? At what point does our data become too much in the hands of others? And also, there is risk when it comes to data privacy laws around user data, right? Specifically, patient health information. You're a pretty big privacy nut, right?
Yeah, yeah. Privacy junkie. I mean, that's kind of where honestly, that's kind of how I got started in tech industry stuff. Because for a while, I was pretty involved with like just awareness around social media and how much they're tracking and like how they're how I was working in youth ministry, so a lot of times with youth, it's like how are they targeting youth to with different algorithms and things like that, and it's like really just trying to understand and then advocate a little bit for like, hey, let's not put everything about our lives out on the internet for everyone to see. But then it gets into the deep stuff, like how they're tracking your scrolling habits, and they're tracking what you're looking at and what ads you're clicking on, so they can target you, or they're tracking your website cookies. So it's all that kind of stuff where I'm like, I don't love this, but
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And I'm the same way, right? Like, it's scary the amount of data that sometimes others have on us, and we all talk about this, right? How much data that Google and Facebook and especially have on us, but you might be surprised just how much of that others have as well. And so, what's interesting, Will, is as we jump into this, got a whole bunch of people on live stream. So, thanks for jumping in with us today. We're going to be talking about a couple really interesting things today, but specifically around privacy and cyber insurance. And Will, talk to us a little bit about this whole world now, where we saw GDPR was one of the ones that took the lead in protecting private information, client, customer information, personal information in Europe. And now almost, I think every state in the US now has privacy laws as well, data disclosure laws, this sorts of thing, right? So this world has really changed for us, hasn't
yeah.
it, in terms of how we treat the data of our customers, clients. It's just totally different, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think there's just rules and regulations that are being put. I mean, even if you think about it, in the past, I don't know exactly when, but I'd say in the past year at least, maybe two, for the first time, you started seeing all these pop-ups. They're like, "Hey, we're tracking your cookies. Do you give consent for us to track this information on you?" And you have to go in. Most people, I'm sure, just click allow all cookies because who wants to deal with going in and doing their own settings? But you can go in and actually say exactly what you want them to be tracking. And like I think on that level, there's at least some regulation in place saying, hey, you need to make people aware when you're tracking their data. So that's at least a step in the right direction when it comes to privacy. I mean, I remember watching. I don't know if you saw the Social Dilemma movie on Netflix. There's a documentary, but that one, I mean, that's an amazing documentary just in like how they are tracking your information and then turning it around to advertisers to use. So like when you understand that, maybe clicking that allow all cookies thing isn't the best idea,
Right.
but you're starting to see that. So
Right.
yeah,
So here's where it gets interesting then is it seems that so now we have legal precedent, right, of how
right.
we treat and protect this data. We also saw, it seemed like to me it was in the 2020 era. You remember when all those websites started spinning up this whole like, we track your cookies, click here to be okay with it. And it's like, it
Hmm.
started because of GDPR. And
Hmm.
now you see it everywhere. Like
Hmm.
every single website you go to, it's got that little pop up and you just, hit the button and move on for most people. Sometimes you actually dig into that. You can like turn off some personal stuff. But Will, what I've noticed is it's very different across the board, right? Some websites literally it's just we track you and that's it. Others, all the way into fine grained. I can turn this cookie off. This one I can't because it's required or whatever. So it seems like there's while a lot of companies move towards that, there's not a lot of standardization. And you have to wonder how much of that has been looked at
Yeah.
and is been cleared to be cleared through legal to say yes, this meets privacy compliance laws, right?
Yeah. And I mean, this isn't anything new. Like when it's nothing new for like the advertisement world either. Like I remember when I was in college, I took a CS class and my
CS,
teacher
computer
did
science.
computer science. Yeah,
Okay.
sorry. Did a My teacher did like a presentation on ads, and like you remember you probably still know when you get those banner ads or you get pop-up ads, it's like sometimes they intentionally will put the X to click it out in the most random spot, or they'll put it in a spot where you literally can't see it because it blends in with the ad itself. Like it's that kind of thing where, hey, the rule is here, we put the X, but we're gonna do everything in our power to make it so you can't dig into it or skip through this, and it's like it, it's it's like, hey, we're gonna follow the rule, but as lightly as possible. So we're starting to kind of see that, I think, with these cookie things, and there's no standard. I think it's just there's probably like a very base rule that says, hey, you have to tell people you're tracking them and give access to this, and this, and people can put that banner however they want.
Yeah, for sure. And so this brings up this link right here, right, that we wanted to talk about. I'm going to turn chat overlay off so we can get a little bit of a bigger screen, but did want to say shout outs to Tracy. What's going on? Glad you were in the house, my friend. And Umberto is exactly right, my friend. Transparency is a huge
Oh
gap.
yeah.
It's getting bigger and it's not where we need to be. And I agree. It certainly is becoming that. So, Will, talk to me about this article from WTW, Client Alert, Metapixel. I'll kind of scroll down a little bit, but talk to me about what's going on here and why this sort of came to your attention and how some of this came to your attention. Oh, and
Yeah.
as I
So
click OK on the privacy, pop up.
perfect. Irony. So a friend of mine, to not be named, works in cyber insurance, and he just sent. He's like, "There's a lot of things going on. This is all public information. There's a lot of things going on in the cyber insurance underwriting world, and I mean, if you've worked with FifthWall at all, you know that cyber insurance applications are consistently changing, and they're always adding new questions and new things to those policies, or to the application questions, and part of that comes from what happens in the real world. And there was a breach in there was a breach around effectively a health portal that people could go on for a hospital, and they could access their subscription data, and they could do all sorts of things around uh, uh, like their medical information and whatnot. What's weird is that if you're familiar with, like, so cookies is the common term, but Facebook has their own version they call pixels, right? So there's metapixels is what they call them, and basically what happened is within this portal there were trackers happening. So people started to see that their they were getting targeted ads for the medications that they were taking and things like that, which was insane because they're like, wait a minute, this is where does HIPAA fit into this? Where does regulation fit into this? Where do all those things kind of fit into the question of, wait, I thought I had, patient confidentiality with this within this portal, but now they have ads literally targeting them. Um, Around things that they thought were private, and that created kind of a scuffle. And what's crazy now is that there are actually claims coming in on cyber insurance policies around this stuff, and I think that's where we're seeing a bit of a whoa, let's take a step back for a second, because cyber insurance, we're always thinking cyber insurance policy breach, right? And we're always thinking there has to be a breach in order for there to be a cyber policy, but that's not always the case, because on some of these cyber insurance policies, on a lot of comprehensive cyber insurance policies, you have a couple of coverages, namely regulatory fines and multimedia liability, that don't necessarily require a breach in order to provide coverage.
Okay.
And so what's happening is when you talk multimedia liability, it's typically something around like slandering someone unintentionally, or you say something about someone on social media and they come after you for it, so you get covered for it. And then regulatory fines, it's this kind of stuff. If you're breaking HIPAA codes, or you're breaking compliance, or you're doing things, are they gonna how is insurance going to kick in for that? And it's interesting that on cyber policies, we are actually seeing claims because of legitimate just privacy concerns.
So let's come back to that in
Yeah.
just a minute. Will, what I want you to do in a minute is bring up a sample policy. We show them oftentimes when we onboard that show all the different limits and items. If you can go and pull that up on your computer in a minute, I'm going to have you share that out. Well, I actually want to show those elements so people can see them. But before we get into that too deep, isn't this amazing? Like, goes back to what you said, just looking at what the article says, right? They impermissibly collected and received PHI, patient health information, including IP addresses, remember this day and age where it used to be this day of bliss where like IPs were nobody cared, right? But patient information, according to this, was included. IP addresses are included, but we know that IP addresses are considered personal information for sure, especially according to a lot of jurisdictions. Patient search terms, that's pretty surprising. Appointment information, medication, physician names without patient's consent, and I think that's a big piece of it. Right now, I am not a lawyer and neither is Will. And I don't know if Eric Tildes or Spencer Pollock or Brad Gross, I can't see all the people that are listening today, but if any of you are listening right now, will you just DM me? Those are all lawyer friends of mine, and I will invite you onto here because I'd love to hear
Yeah,
what
that'd
you
be
all
awesome.
want to say about this, because I'm not going to go too far into like trying to interpret law, right? That is out of my wheelhouse. So I'm just throwing it out there. If any chance Eric or Brad or anyone are listening, because a lot of times they'll jump into these. I want you on the show. We'll bring you in right now, talk about this from your perspective. But yeah, look at this. So, been cited as a basis for data breach notifications impacting nearly 5 million patients. All of a sudden, we're talking data breach. Isn't that a wild jump? And then you look at this, Will, and it's pretty crazy stuff, right? Violating federal privacy laws, including the Electronic Communications Privacy Act. Look at this one, the Pennsylvania
Wiretapping.
Wiretap
Yeah,
App. So,
that's the big one.
so people are looking at this and like, wait a second, wiretaps? Like, this is not a wiretap, but you see how this is being construed. And a lot of times we have legislation's been written years prior that can affect us now in ways that we're not prepared for. So I just think some of this is interesting. This one's more new, California Invasion of Privacy Act. So you see some of these that are here, right? And so this is should be an alarm bell for anybody thinking, wait a second, so I'm not sure we've really assessed our tracking data and metrics and what type of information is available and where it flows. Will, I guess what you're saying before we get into some of the how the policy pulls into this and thereby why insurance is concerned with this, I just want you to talk about that for a minute. This is becoming a big deal, isn't it?
It is, I think, and if you scroll up a little bit, there's one uh, under that sentence you just highlighted where it says further the suits allege that the healthcare entities who utilize Metapixel, that's the last sentence of that paragraph, that utilize Metapixel on their websites failed to receive express consent from the impacted individuals and have failed to have valid contracts in place. Now, again, this isn't even, I don't even know if this has reached the courts yet. There's a class action lawsuit, so this
Yeah,
is like big
right.
what if
Yeah,
conversation we're having right now, but it's super interesting to me because I'm into privacy and I do cyber insurance. And those two, this is one of those instances where not necessarily breach related stuff is and privacy is interacting with cyber insurance. So that's that first part. I just think it's fascinating. And again, can't really get into the law around it because I'm not a lawyer and I can't
well,
get into every
Look,
piece. But go ahead.
look at this one, Will. So, right from the article, Bloomberg Law reports that since February 2022, so not long ago,
Uh-huh.
over 45 proposed class actions have been filed alleging that Metapixel tracked individual personal video consumption data in
Yeah.
violation of VPPA.
And
So,
that's the part that's freaking out the insurance companies because
yeah,
if you have a cyber liability policy and regulatory fines are built into your cyber liability policy and the definitions do not expressly state that you need to have a breach of like a cyber crime breach in order to receive coverage for this, there's a good chance that your policy will cover something like this. So to have 45 class action lawsuits is I think it has the insurance companies a little nervous of what's to come. And again, it hasn't hit the courts. We don't know how this is
right.
going to play out, but it's the kind of thing where there we are starting to see a response to that. And I and I think rightfully so. When you
Yep.
define something a certain way, Wes, I don't know if I have the ability to share my screen through this. I don't see anything allowing me to.
Uh,
Oh
yeah,
wait,
I
yes,
don't
I can.
know.
I lied. I
Okay,
found it.
let me unshare this so you
Okay.
can bring yours up.
So, again, we don't want to get too into the legalese of the insurance world here because an insurance policy is always a fun thing to read, right? Can we? I just shared. Oh wait, hold on a minute. Don't share. Let's share a window. There we go. All right, I just shared something. I think you have to make it live.
There
Okay,
we are.
so this is really tiny. I'm gonna try and make it bigger. There's a lot of word. This is what you'll see on an insurance policy, right? This is a Tokyo Marine policy. It's just a standard form. But they say things like, multimedia liability coverage. You're going to see all these different coverages, and we brought these up. But what you'll notice, like with multimedia, there's nothing in this definition about a breach. So this coverage will apply, or should apply, in the event of a multimedia wrongful act. And then obviously, then you have to go to the definitions to understand what a multimedia wrongful act is, or things like that. But you look through these, and you have privacy, regulatory, defense, and penalties coverage. And again, um, it says right here, privacy, regulatory proceeding instituted against the because of a security breach or privacy breach. So security breach is one of those things, but a privacy breach expands that a little bit. And while I would say most of the security coverages come from that security breach part, there's some of these things that'll kick in the event of privacy being breached. And I think that's where these class action lawsuits coming up, and it's starting to freak people out a little bit, because you're like, wait, what's happening here? What are we seeing in the insurance space? Cyber insurance is supposed to protect me against cyber crimes, but now people who are getting their data collected by cookies and trackers are starting to come after companies, and they're filing claims because of it.
Pretty wild. Pretty wild.
Yeah.
Okay. So that then brings up this question of what the heck do we do about this, right? So a few
Mhm.
things, but before we get to that, let's pop chat back up over here. There's a few folks I wanted to say hi to. If you're listening, give us some feedback. Is this something that you've thought through before? Do you feel like you know your company's position on this? Have you properly assessed any of this, or are you like, dude, I am not sure. I think the reason we're letting you in on this early is because I think it's important for you to think about risk. And a lot of times when you see the insurance industry sort of signal a flag, that is a big deal, because they're seeing things because they're sometimes the only ones that do see things, because they're the ones that pay out the claims on certain things. And so when they throw up a flag, I think we all need to go and listen and say, why are they saying this? Why is this important to them? Because it could become important to me. It could become something systemic. We saw this with the ransomware attacks that were happening through 2016 and on. So it's definitely something to think about. So let's get some quotes up here. My good friend Mike Riggs, good point here. Over collection of data is a problem as well. So it's not just the fact of what we're collecting, but sometimes we collect too much. And I'm not as familiar with the Drizzly lawsuit, but I do remember reading a little bit about it. And to Mike's point, CEO being individually named, yeah, absolutely. Steve Sigmund. Steve is a really good friend of mine. What an awesome person. Appreciate all you do as well, Steve. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for spending some time with us. Steve, you're a great person, and I'm glad to know you. And Elvin. Oh man, I haven't talked to you in forever. Elvin was one of our friends from Perch, was one of our awesome analysts there. He says he loves him some policy. Well, let me tell you what, I love me some Elvin. So thanks for joining, Elvin. You're awesome. And then my good friend Rick Augustin. I've known Rick since college, and is super awesome. And I'm a little jealous because he lives in like ski territory, and he's probably, I'm not sure why he's listening to this right now instead of getting ready to go skiing. But he says he haven't properly assessed this, but he's blown away, right? So yeah, it's definitely something to be concerned about. And then Umberto, cyber insurance doesn't protect you against attacks. It's a financial risk mitigation if an attack is successful. They do provide some best practices to help improve your posture. Bingo, right? Yep, it is definitely not a protective control. In fact, we talked about this when you sort of align where cyber insurance fits in the cyber defense matrix. It really is that right of boom, right? It really is that what do we do after the breach happens? And of course, cyber insurance doesn't just magically make things right, but it does provide some of those things that can help you in the restoration processes. And we can talk more about that if folks want to know. But that's a great point to understand, is that it's not the thing that stops all of this as well. Riggs, checking back in again. A lot of this is third-party risk management. Innocently incorporating third-party services to get marketing and tracking data may be an unknown legal liability. Yeah, that's a great point, Mike, is that I think a lot of times you just sort of just default to what's there, right? Like, oh, my web hosting provider has one of those little pop-ups, just enable and off I go. And we just didn't properly think about all this. And then we didn't even vet the options. Like, oh, it's got Google tracking, just click the button. Oh, this one looks really cool. I'm going to check that one too. And we're not really thinking through the risks that come in with it. Will, any thoughts on that?
No, I think what you said is exactly true. I think something to just to point out is what's important when you're reading through these policies is, and why when Wes brought it up with lawyers and all that kind of stuff, is there's so many layers of definitions in a policy. So you want to read your coverages, you want to read what each of those words, and that one I put up was helpful because it literally bolds all the really important words. Like they actually kind of make it easier for you. So then you can go into the definitions page and understand what each thing means. Because I think ultimately different carriers are provide. I mean, we even see it on the insurance side. Different coverages have different names, but they all kind of, a lot of times, a lot of them mean the same thing. So in the same way, we just want to, like, when you're exploring this kind of thing, we want to make sure that we're digging into um, really exactly what's being covered in the event of these things. But I
So
think that's why a lot of this is going to courts and different things like that.
So, Will, if someone has like you showed that sample from Tokyo Marine, which was awesome, but people may
Which
have
was like
questions
a
around
page
that
of
and
60.
just want more clarification. Can they reach out to you if they have questions on that?
Yeah, they can reach out to Fifth Wall for sure. We can point them and help work them through, as long as it's a cyber liability policy.
Right.
If it's
Right.
anything else, I mean, unfortunately, that's not our wheelhouse. So we do the cyber liability stuff, so we can really dig in on a deeper level and explore that. And every cyber policy from different carriers looks a little different, so we need to really make sure that we're digging in and reading what each of those things mean.
Yep. Yep. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. So do that, right? If you guys want to reach out, fifthwallsolutions.com/MSP if you're an MSP. But otherwise, yeah, reach out if you want some clarity on that. So let's
hmm
talk about the next piece here is what do I do if, I'm concerned and I want to know, where I stand with this? Well, here you go. This is the markup.org/blacklight. So you can go check this out anytime you want to, the markup.org/blacklight. And it's an open source kind of an inspector for your website. So let's just pop a website in here. I thought what we should do is our own. What do you think, Will?
yeah. Let's do it.
Solutions.com.
Let's show
Might
people
as
how
well.
much data we're collecting.
Yeah. So we hit scan site, and this one came back really quick because we don't really have a lot. So just one tracker. This is less than half the average of 7 that we find on popular sites. Third party cookie found is less than half the average of 3 that we found. So we can actually pull these down. We can take a look, and this one's from Alphabet, which is Google, right? It's Google's own tracker. So we can see that. And then as we scroll down, we can actually see more information about who those trackers are. So in this case, Google's or Alphabet's, because that's the only one that we're using, we can actually pull this down and see what we know about it. And one thing that's kind of cool here is they even show this right here. And I want to show this to everybody. I'm just going to YOLO this live, baby, because why not? The markup, the internet, blah, 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 blah. An Alphabet spokesperson told the markup that internet users can go here if they want to opt out. And I encourage you to check this out. This is my own. So this is just myadcenter.google.com. This is not for the corporate side. This is for your own personal side. But I recommend turning this stuff off, right? So if you look right here, personal ads for me, for Wes, is off. If I go into customize ads, off. If I go into manage privacy, off, off, off. I've got everything off. And the reason I have that is because there's no need for, I just don't need Google to be so kind to me to deliver personalized ads. I'm okay without it. My browsing experience can be just fine without it. So there you have it. I wanted to show
It,
that to you just because of its relevance. So Will, I want you to jump in as well. But while we're doing this, I'm going to turn chat back on, and I want
sure.
somebody to give me their own website, and let's do another website on here and see what we see. So who wants to be
Yeah,
brave on the live stream
I
today?
love that.
Give me your website, and I will put it up on here.
Nice. Yeah, as they're doing that, something that's interesting, what you just showed, Wes, with the like, what information is Google holding on to and tracking when you think of privacy, right? When you think of your personal devices like Siri, if you have an Apple device, or you have a Google device or something like an Android, they're gonna, I mean, they're holding on to certain data. I'm a huge proponent of Google Homes as a privacy junkie, right? Which makes no sense at all because I have a bunch of smart devices in my house. But what you can actually go in to do is stop the Google Home from holding any of your data. Now that does make the results you get a little weird sometimes because it doesn't actually collect anything. So its targeted information about you isn't as accurate. There were a couple of times where I asked what the weather was, and if I'm not specific as to where I'm living, it'll give me the weather in, like, sometimes it was like Cairo, Egypt, or things like that, just really random places because I don't let it track any of my data, but I'm still able to use it. And I think that's important, is that a lot of times, because of the machine learning, which all really cool stuff, but the machine learning learns because it's collecting information on you. And so to to turn that off may add a little convenience, just like turning on MFA adds a little inconvenience, but like you are doing a lot to protect yourself in the process. So it's sometimes worth it. So
All right,
oh, we
there
got
we
one.
go. I was about to say Wes has a sad face because of all the people in the live stream today, no one was brave enough to let us YOLO this. Well, this is, it says LinkedIn user, but I know that's Mike Riggs. So we're going to take you up on this, Mr. Riggs. So the MSP. And by the way, that doesn't get the rest of you out. I want at least one other person to give me their domain. It needs to be yours. Don't go sick me on your competitor and be like, ha ha, give me your own. So the MSPstore.com. Let's see what you got going here, Mike. Let's see how nefarious Michael Riggs from the MSP Store is. By the way, the MSP Store is awesome. If you don't know what they're doing, a really great distributor, helping MSPs, especially for things like Cyber CNS and some great platforms that are out there. Look at that. Mr. Riggs has got a goose egg, right? So if you're going to go somewhere, go there. That's great, Mike. Thanks for showing us that and showing off your zero. That's great. So who else is going to go? Come on. I've got chat open. Don't be shy. Don't be silent. I want to know. Let's do at least one more name coming up, and let's get that bad boy in here. So the thing I wanted to mention on this a little bit as well is go test this yourself for sure, and then take these results back to senior management and make sure that you've opened up a conversation. Make sure that you open up a conversation with your attorney. If you don't have an attorney, we don't assign one here, but there's a few that we really like, and especially if you're an MSP today, we're big fans of Spencer Pollock. We're big fans of Brad Gross. Big fans of Eric Tildes. Not necessarily endorsing any of them. We're not paid. They're just ones that I know, and they're great, right? And I would recommend opening a conversation with some attorney that understands cyber law,
Yeah.
and privacy law, and just have them take a peek at this, because you certainly, may be one that gets shocked or surprised by how much stuff is potentially leaking out the door.
Yeah. And I think it's important to recognize that whenever you see, so what we talked about at the beginning, when there were all those class action lawsuits, what was it, 40? When you start to see large responses to a particular, like one particular avenue, um, chances are the insurance companies are taking note too. And that's like something to something to consider here is right now you're not necessarily seeing anything surrounding privacy laws, privacy compliance necessarily in this regard of cookie tracking and pixel trackers and things like that on an application. But who knows what to come when carriers start to see stuff like this and they're like, okay, well, this might not amount to anything. No claims might be paid out because they might not fit under the definition of what it actually says. But at the same time, just to cover ourselves, we may add this as something to what we allow for eligibility in a policy. You don't know. And like that's just where I think when especially when it comes to regulatory stuff, when there are regulations and codes and things that you have to maintain laws around things, it's probably pretty important to check to make sure you're following that and that you're up to snuff.
Indeed so. Indeed so. All right. Well, no one else is being brave here. I'm super disappointed in you, amazing folks. I thought someone was going to give me their domain. Maybe some people scanned their own and was like, "Whoops, we should probably share ours." But I encourage you to try some. Maybe even pick some of your vendors and suppliers that are out there and just kind of see where they're at. Right? I mean, I don't know. We could YOLO one of those. If someone wants to give me a recommendation in chat, I'll go pull one up. I mean, this is free. You can scan anybody and anyone. I wasn't here to pull anyone out. That's why I started with our own company first. Shoot, how about one of mine? I've got Dictator Coin. Let's see what this one does. And this one I'm actually interested in because it's a GoDaddy hosted site. So let's see if there's anything nefarious happening behind the scenes. Dictator Coin is a joke that I made. I own my own crypto that I created to show how scam cryptos are made, and also vote for West Dictator. So, I got to have my own currency, right? So let's see what this one is, because I'm just kind of curious here. All right. I got two that showed up. Oh, just third-party cookies. Okay, so no ad trackers. Let's find out. Let's see what these are here. Okay, looks like both are Alphabet. So again, pretty vanilla, pretty innocuous, pretty standard. Let's pick somebody else. Will, let's see. Who should we pick? Let's pick somebody bigger.
I tried Facebook and Google on there, and they didn't show up with anything. But
not
I don't know how
surprised.
that's possible.
Yeah, not surprised. I'm thinking let's pull someone up that's big, but let's see.
Well, try Amazon, Amazon.com.
Okay.
Because anytime I search for something on there, I start to see targeted ads. There you
Well,
go.
there you go.
Right.
we
So
got
which makes sense. I mean, you're shopping online and you start looking at things, and then they literally start showing you the things that you were looking at as targeted ads, right? So that makes sense to me.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Let's take a look at Reddit. 2 and 2. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? That's really interesting.
I
How
think
about our friends?
anywhere you see advertisements um built into the page, you're probably going to see a lot of ad trackers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um or third party cookies at least.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Anyway, I encourage you to try this. Um,
It's a fun tool.
it definitely is, but moreover, we do encourage you just to kind of jump back into. Does Cisco not have anything? Maybe it's so many it just can't finish. Who the heck knows? But what we do encourage for you folks to do is just understand there's a reason why insurance is interested in this, because they're the ones that see the systemic risk. They're the ones that typically pay out oftentimes in claims. Oh, yep, it came back. We got to show this to you. So
Oh, there you go.
no, no hate going Cisco's way, but boy, that's a lot. And I was hoping to find one that had a lot just so we could look. Okay, there we are. So the good news is I don't really see any in here that are like in terms of like shady companies, right? We all know Oracle. Actually, I don't know much about Magnite, but Verizon, Salesforce, Amazon, LinkedIn. Okay, I get all those. Right? I'm not saying that makes it okay, right? It just depends on what kind of data they may have and what they do with it. So you can actually peek each one of these up, kind of see a little bit more information about it. You can pull these up, and so it's just a very eye-opening experience. So, Will, one other thing I wanted to talk about as we get ready to close the live stream. If you guys have any questions for us, leave them in chat. This right here comes from CPO Magazine, and I thought this one was interesting, just as a high level. These are some things we've been talking about for quite some time, but there's some interesting things that are in here. Now, some of this comes from study data, and you guys, if you follow me, I talk about confirmation bias a lot in study data and like threat reports and things like that. So you have to be careful sometimes, read between the lines a little bit as you do with this one, but it's kind of interesting. So demand has jumped. A new report from cybersecurity firm Delinea. I don't know. In fact, I don't even know them. Who the heck is Delinea? Okay, so they're a PAM solution. Okay, I didn't know them. So that's interesting. So they came out with finds that look at this. Nearly 80% of companies that have coverage, cybersecurity coverage, have used it, and 50% have used it more than once.
Wow.
That doesn't really line up with me. Does it line up with you, Will? We've got some pretty good visibility into this.
I mean, yeah, I don't necessarily have the hard data with the policies that we carry, so I can't speak to it, but I can't think of, based in my time working here, I can't think of use the 50% number. I can't even think of 50% claims being filed that I know of.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Um, yeah. Okay. I don't either. It seems high, right? And then yet only 30% are carrying policies. But let's just play this out. If 80% of companies that have insurance are, and Mark added in T-Mobile into chat. If we can get back to that, Mark, I'll pop that one in there. If 80% of companies that have cyber insurance policies or I should say, if companies that have cyber insurance policies, 80% of them are filing claims of some kind, that's egregiously high. And what that means is the barrier to entry is either too easy or the assessment process and the underwriting is too simplistic, whatever. That does not jive. And let's just say it's
Are they
60%.
are they specifically saying claims here, or they just said they've used it? So does that mean
Yeah.
that they've
It
filed a
talked about
claim?
it talked about in some form or fashion, but maybe not, a full,
Sure.
if a full claim. Yeah. So there's some interesting
Got
data
it.
that so we just don't fully know. That's a good question, Will. We just don't
Right.
fully know, right? But this, in spite of 93% of respondents saying that their applications to cyber insurance were improved on the first try. So first time I got in, and then 80% are asking are making a claim of some kind. That's pretty wild to me, right? Overall, 70% say they've applied for cyber insurance, and 65% of those report that the process taking fewer than 3 months. So I don't know. I just thought this was some interesting data here. That I think if we look at this study data, I think we're starting to glean what we're already seeing in the insurance circles, that the application process and the underwriting process is getting more and more strenuous. It's not as easy to get it, because you're not going to see for-profit insurance companies just happily continuing to pay out ransoms or other claims they're going to make it harder and harder to be eligible. They're going to force you to have more maturity. And so I just thought this is a really interesting article. If anyone wants it, reach out to us and we'll get you a copy of it. But there's a lot of really good data inside all this. Any thoughts on this, Will?
I mean, it makes sense. It's just it makes sense in terms of the trending numbers. I mean, if you think of how insurance is designed, it's a company that is, I mean, they no no company wants to pay claims, although they will pay claims because it's like that's what they're, bound to do. But it's the kind of thing where they're not going to take on risks if those risks are putting them in a place where it's like, well, chances are I'm going to pay this claim, or I'm going to pay a claim because of this risk. So, I mean, that's with any line of insurance. So with cyber, especially after 2020, when everything went crazy and everyone started working from home and you had no one protecting themselves with RDP and there's no MFA anywhere for anybody and everyone was getting breached and cyber claims started going up, that it makes sense that things would get more complicated. And I just think even like what we talked about with the privacy stuff, if you start to see questions about that, or you start to see, who knows? Um, I do think that on one level, it is getting more complex as it gets a little more focused onto like what good security posture is. At the same time, sometimes I'm not certain if it'll ever settle because we live in the cyber world and tech is consistently changing and growing, which makes me think cyber criminals are going to come up with new ways to hack and new types of hacks, and coverages are going to change, and it's going to be very interesting.
It will indeed. Yep. So I encourage you to go read the rest of this article because it's really got some interesting stuff in it. And the other thing I thought was pretty interesting as well here, Will. They're saying the obvious things. 80%, if 80% are filing claims, is not a sustainable business model. You compare this to auto, that's somewhere around 6%. You have a huge difference, right?
Oh yeah,
And so we've got to, what insurance is naturally thinking is we're going to force more maturity to you. But there's
yeah,
also some other interesting things too. This talks about at the moment, insurers tend to be simply providing policyholders a checklist. We know that, it's here. Do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? Right. And yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Right. But we know that some new things are coming in. Continuous underwriting. We can do a live stream on what that's looking like right now. It's not going well, but we see changes in the wind there of like, we need to assess you, periodically. And they even mentioned this, and a next likely development might come for very soon for the highest risk sectors is the industry standard requirement to actually demonstrate the effectiveness of a defensive posture in a simulated attack. So
mm.
what would that look like? How could we defend all of this? Premon, I see you in chat there. Yes, we'll make sure to get you a link. I'll post when we're done the live stream. I'll post a link into this. So that's interesting, right?
Are
And I've
they
talked to
actually saying?
MSPs about will we see security standards come in, and could those security standards be an audited process to say that you're mature?
So is it saying something like there may be for higher place risks tabletop exercises that need to be done so that they can see how effective they would be in wow,
Yeah,
interesting.
possibly, and possibly even into more advanced adversary simulation,
Yeah,
possibly into, less on the simulation side and more on the audited pathway to see, do you have these things in place? Has someone actually looked over the
sure.
maturity of your security program? Yeah, exactly. And then the last thing, we'll close on the live stream on this comment here. I thought this was interesting. Another development is that some carriers are starting to say, you know what, we're okay with cyber policies, but we've seen too much ransomware. So we're just going to carve out of the policy ransomware. So if you have ransomware, we're not going to pay the ransom. We're not going to help you on the recovery. I don't think we've seen a lot of that on our side with the carriers we deal with every day. Will, do we? But is that a shock to you?
Um, not really. I mean, ransomware is it is like the one thing that you hear of probably the most out there. So it doesn't really shock me that um it doesn't shock me that it what it's saying here. What I find interesting is along with what this is saying, there's also a lot of stuff coming out about should you pay the ransom? Are you paying the ransom? Whereas like ransomware coverages on policies are usually help designed to help pay portions of the ransom. So it's like it's just interesting here to think, okay, where are we going to land with that? You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So there you have it. Some interesting things for a Friday for you to ruminate and chew on. Privacy, it's a big deal. Looking at some of the data coming back, we see the changes in the wind. We are not settled at all when it comes to cyber insurance. We're not settled at all when it comes to how the assessment and the underwriting is done, the costs of getting premiums. I mean, all these things are just changing. And so if you're concerned about that, definitely reach out to us at Fifth Wall. Be happy to jump on a call anytime, answer questions that you have. No need to sell you. We're just here to answer the questions you have. And if you are trying to solve for that, especially, now that a lot of companies have those January 1 renewals coming up,
Yeah.
reach out to us. We can help you with that as well, for sure. Anything else, Will, as we close out? Any other thoughts, comments, questions that you wanted to bring up?
Turn off those data trackers.
Turn off those data trackers. Yes, indeed.
Like,
Yes,
get
indeed.
my tinfoil hat for a second. Everyone's
Y-
tracking you guys.
yep, absolutely. All right. Well, I think we'll cut it there, Umberto. Appreciate that. Great talk, Wes. Cheers for the non-MSP. Read the fine print. Yes, yes. The
Yeah.
truth, read that fine print. If you can't understand the fine print, reach out to everyone from your own attorney to the insurance, the carrier themselves. Make sure you do not need to be in the business of having insurance policies that you don't understand. We've seen that happen, and yucky things can happen out of that. And thankfully, the recent ruling will help organizations, but will change the policies. Yeah, very much so. Matt Custer, thank you very much. Appreciate the kind words. So we'll cut it here. Again, if you guys have any questions, fifthwallsolutions.com. Reach out to us anytime. Hope you guys have an awesome rest of the weekend, and tell your bosses that Wes said you could just take the rest of the afternoon off for listening to this awesome live stream and getting so smart. All right, guys, we'll talk to y'all later.
See ya.